I was just making mention about Pat Conroy, the Defence Minister, making mention that we face the greatest strategic uncertainty since World War II.
Yes, no, that's exactly right. The thing is, what we are facing is a set of circumstances where our great ally, the United States, has it's not eclipsed, but it's relatively weaker than it's been in living memory. And it's being challenged by a rising China and a state of flux that has been exacerbated by the situation in Ukraine and the adventurous, aggressive behaviour of Russia. The combination of that and the fact that there's this pact between China and Russia suggests that there's a great uncertainty across East Asia and the Indo-Pacific and beyond that's really unnerving the neighbourhood. Japan, Korea, India, Australia, Indonesia, many countries are uncomfortable with what's going on. The ones closer to China, of course, are more nervous and more careful about how they respond. For Australia, though, it's been very significant that we've been learning some lessons, if you like, from what's happened in Ukraine. Now, critics are saying, look, there's very little to learn from Ukraine because it's a land border, it's a land war in Asia, if you like, or in Europe. What's that got to do with Australia? Of course, the question is, what do you need for Australia? We've got a defence force, a boutique defence force. It's actually kind of like mini-me that's kind of being able to it's very good at what it does, but it's got very limited range. Even our F-35 fighters have got limited range. Our Harpoon missiles on our ships have got a couple of hundred kilometre range. And what we've realised is that if you want to be able to deter, if you want to be able to defend yourself and actually make a potential adversary think twice about doing something that's going to confront you, you need something that's going to make potentially life difficult for them. And that's what the Defence Force is for. And if your Defence Force doesn't have reach, if you can't actually reach out and touch anybody of any consequence, then you leave yourself very, very vulnerable. So the new HIMARS system that's being acquired, it makes eminent sense. It basically broadens our options for defence and for being able to deter any would-be aggressor. So it makes a lot of sense in my books.
And what do you think about the increase of drones, and what are you most concerned about?
So the drone question is a really interesting one, because when we think about drones, and I've written a bit about this in a book recently on drones and warfare, we've got to make a distinction between autonomous, semi-autonomous and fully autonomous. Now, the fully autonomous drone idea is certainly, it's a controversial one, but we're seeing around the world the semi-autonomous, the human-in-the-loop idea, a controlled drone model is increasingly the norm. And of course, the question is, well, what kind of capability, what kind of range, and what kind of lethality does it come with? And that's, of course, a mixed bag. We've got a range of capabilities that the Defence Force is acquiring, and that's matching what's happening around the world, and it reflects also the dynamics we've seen unfold in Ukraine, where the utility of drones, cheap, accessible, easy to manufacture and reproduce, is a game changer. The conventional weapon systems, the defensive systems to shoot down aircraft don't necessarily work against little drones. And so you're complicating the situation for an adversary if you are developing a suite of drones, but also you're improving your ability to overwatch and have supervisory ability to surveil, to have reconnaissance, to have eyes and ears over your potential targets or potential threat points. So this is the way things are going. That combined with cyber capabilities and space capabilities, the matrix of all of these mixing in together is giving you a suite of capabilities that enables you to defend yourself and be more resilient should one of them be vulnerable to an attack or taken out by a potential adversary.
And Professor, are there talks at all of Australia producing and manufacturing more military equipment here in Australia?
So this is one of the consequences of the AUKUS deliberations, if you like. We've focused mostly on nuclear propulsion for submarines, but the biggest and probably quicker, more accessible benefits from AUKUS is the idea of manufacturing in Australia of some of the technologies that we've relied on being imported directly from the United States and to a certain extent from the United Kingdom. And the bottom line is we know that historically there are many examples in history where when a crisis comes and you look to your overseas supplier for reinforcements or additional stocks, they're needing them at the same time. So we basically are now looking in Australia to, and this makes a lot of sense, I think the Defence Strategic Review is going to agree on this, is to bolster the ability for us to manufacture and resupply licensed versions of machinery and weapon systems that might be manufactured in Europe or the United States, but which they have short stocks of as well. And therefore, by bolstering our ability, we actually make ourselves more useful as an ally, but also more self-reliant and more resilient. That makes a lot of sense.
Thank you so much. Very well explained. Great to see you, Professor John Blaxland.
Thanks for having me on the program.